Good afternoon, boys and girls. I'm going to pick up where we left off with Sink or Swim. And where we last left off after we finished chapter 15 yesterday, Colton had gone overboard to save Woody. And Woody ended up almost drowning him because he was panicking. So even though Colton had on a life vest, Woody's weight was dragging him down. And Straub ended up being the one to really save both of them. Chief was very upset. And then Chief ended up telling Colton that he did a pretty brave thing trying to save his friend. And that Straub did a pretty amazing thing jumping in to save him. So we're going to pick up where we left off. So this is chapter 16. When they let us off the ship for Liberty in Key West, Florida, most of the crew headed to the bars, but I went looking for a bank and a post office. Straub and Woody tried to get me to go with them, but I wasn't planning on spending any of my pay. I figured the sooner I cashed my paycheck and mailed off the money to Mama, the less chance there was that I'd change my mind about it. Plus, after 2 weeks of tight quarters on our little ship, I was ready to just be away from everybody for a few hours, including my pals. Before I mailed off my pay, I added a letter that was like the other letters. I thought about making up some things that might make Mama happy to read about, like always going to church, singing in the choir, and maybe going to night school after work. But I hated lying to her on top of breaking her heart by leaving the way I did. Her not knowing where I was or anything else about me that was real just added to the heartbreak. I didn't feel much like that boy who took the dinghy across the sound just a couple of months before and spent the night shivering curled under the boat. I'd been homesick ever since I left, but I was usually too busy or too tired for it to mess me up. One night up on my bunk, I'd started missing Danny so much that I guess I must have made a noise, a big sigh or something, because Straub shot up in his bunk underneath me and asked what was the matter. Were we under attack? Did something happen? No, I'd whispered, not wanting to wake up anybody else. I was just missing home is all. Which was true enough. After I mailed the money home to Mama, I wandered around Key West. It wasn't like I had so much as a nickel in my pocket, so there wasn't much of anything I could do. I left the downtown and wandered through a cemetery where all the graves were above ground. I guess because everything was barely over sea level in Key West. The stones were so white they hurt my eyes. I kept going down palm-lined streets where people lived in big houses with grand porches and white picket fences. In front of one house, the biggest on Whitehead Street, a couple of cats were out front wrestling with each other. They didn't look too wild, so I bent down to pet them and they let me. One even let me pick him up, and pretty soon he was purring, that cat motor running loud as long as I rubbed his belly. The other cat swam around my legs, but he didn't want to be picked up. He just seemed to want to be close by. I liked having them with me, and in a few minutes other cats emerged from the shrubs and bushes that surrounded the house, easing their way over to also rub up against my legs. Some let me scratch their heads or behind their ears or even rub their bellies like the first one. I hadn't ever liked cats that much. The only animal I much cared about back on Ocracoke was my beach pony, but for some reason I liked this a lot. Then I heard a kid's voice addressing me from the front yard. They've got 6 toes, you know. I looked around but couldn't see anybody among the flowering shrubs, banana trees, coconut trees, and palm trees. I knew he was in there somewhere, though. Count them if you don't believe me, the kid added. I counted the cat's toes, and sure enough, there were 6 on each foot. Pretty strange, huh? Said the kid, standing up and waddling through the bushes and the flowers. He was about my age. My real age, not the age I was pretending to be. Yeah, I said. I've never seen anything like it. Are they all that way? The kid sat down beside me in the grass. Most of them. A ship captain gave that one to Papa. Her name is Snow White. I guess they're all freaks, but they'll still let you pet them. The kid said his name was Patrick, and he asked how old I was, and for some reason, I gave him my real age. That's how old I am too, he said. But you're in the Navy. How did you join? Papa told me you have to be 17 to sign up. Well, I might have fibbed some about my age, I said. You can't tell anybody. Patrick waved away the suggestion. Who would I tell? Anyway, Papa's coming to get me pretty soon on his boat, and he's taking me back to Cuba where he lives. And him and me are going to hunt U-boats. You know about U-boats? That's the German submarines. I had to laugh. Did I know about U-boats? They were all I'd been thinking about for the past 3 months. So you and your dad are going to go after U-boats in, what, a fishing boat or something? Deep sea fishing boat, Patrick said. Papa says we'll radio the Navy when we spot one, and they'll come over from the base they have in Cuba and blow it up. Plus, Papa has rifles. A rifle isn't going to do any good against a submarine, I said. Do you know who my papa is? Patrick said, as if that was any kind of answer. I shook my head. How would I? He's Ernest Hemingway, Patrick said. You know who that is, don't you? Sure, I said, surprised, but trying not to sound it. Ernest Hemingway, the author? Everybody's heard of him. I didn't mention that I'd never read any of Ernest Hemingway's books. He used to live here in Key West with us, but he doesn't anymore, Patrick said, looking kind of sad. He married somebody else. I didn't know what to say about that, so I just kept petting Snow White. Hey, you want to go swimming in our pool? Patrick asked. I'd never met anybody with their own swimming pool before. The only pools I'd ever seen, in fact, were the giant ones at Great Lakes and in Miami at the training centers. There sure weren't any on Ocracoke Island. I followed Patrick through the jungle of a yard, the cats still swarming around us the whole time, to the back of the big house, where there was a long rectangular pool filled with blue water. There's some extra trunks in the house, Patrick said. I'll get you some, come on. A few minutes later, I was out of my navy whites and into a pair of swimming trunks that I had to cinch around my waist with a piece of string to keep them from falling down. Then we were off. Then we went back to the pool, which turned out to be salt water because there was no fresh water on Key West except for rainwater they caught in cisterns. Patrick helpfully explained that to me. Let's do depth charges, he ordered. Depth charges, I repeated. Yeah, you know, what they shoot off ships to blow up U-boats. I told him I knew what depth charges were, and that we had some of them on our patrol craft and fired them off with something called a K-gun. I was just wondering what he meant when he asked me if I wanted to do depth charges. Like cannonballs, Patrick said, and then he ran toward the pool and jumped as high as he could go, grabbed his knees, curled his head and shoulders forward just before he landed and made a great splash. Right, I said, and I did it too. As soon as I came up, somebody else cannonballed into the Hemingway's pool too, yelling, Geronimo, on the way down. It was a boy wearing what looked like a girl's swimming suit. Patrick rolled his eyes. That's my little brother. We call him Gigi. He likes to wear stuff like that. Don't ask me why. Gigi just grinned. I shrugged and we all climbed out and did it again, this time yelling bombs away every time we did a cannonball. After about half an hour, a woman who I guess was their servant or their maid came out with a tray of 3 big glasses of lemonade and a plate of cookies. I didn't even wait to be invited. I drank one of the lemonades in one giant gulp and would have eaten every single cookie if Patrick and Gigi hadn't jumped out of the pool and joined me. It was the funnest time I'd had since Danny got hurt, and even though our bellies were totally full from lemonade and cookies, we didn't wait an hour before we went back in the water like you're supposed to. There were U-boats down at the bottom of that pool, and we were the depth charges that were going to sink them for good, so there was no time to waste. A lady looked out at us a couple of times from an upstairs window in their house. Patrick said it was their mom, and she didn't come outside much. She waved to us, and I waved back, and then she disappeared. I thought of my mom, and how sad she was for a long time after we lost my dad. I wondered how much it was like that for Mrs. Hemingway, even though her husband hadn't passed away. He was still gone, though, married to a different lady, so maybe it was the same. Patrick and Gigi and I played in their swimming pool pretty much the whole rest of the afternoon, interrupted every now and then by their servant coming out with more lemonade, and sometimes we climbed out to chase six-toed cats around their yard. It sure was nice getting to be a kid again. Finally, though, it was time for me to change back into my uniform and go back on board my ship. Little Gigi, still wearing his girl's swimsuit, gave me a book before I left. One their father had written recently called For Whom the Bell Tolls. Then he ran off. Patrick walked with me halfway down the street toward the docks. That book, it's about an American guy in Spain who is fighting the fascists, he said. They're like the Spanish Nazis. Mama won't let us read it, but I bet you'll like it. Papa's the best writer there is. Thanks, I said. Good luck hunting U-boats with your dad down in Cuba. I thought about them in just a fishing boat with a radio and a rifle. Then I added, be safe. You too, Patrick said. We shook hands like grown-ups. And that's the end of chapter 16. So we'll pick up tomorrow with chapter 17. And I'll see you then.